So you've got the camera, you've got the space to shoot, you even have a boudoir client lined up. But now you're wondering, how the heck do I pose someone? Well, I'm gonna walk you through Boudoir Posing 101. I'm Alicia. I've been doing boudoir for over 8 years. And I will admit to the newbies who are out there, I don't think posing guides and memorizing poses is really the way to go, because you might run into a hiccup where a client can't do the pose that you memorized, or you might just have a brain fart and totally forget what you had planned out. You might forget all of those poses that you had just memorized in your posing guide. Got to think about posing more like improv, where we can move and groove, we can change things up. We got to be able to yes and this. So understanding the basics of boudoir posing means we can pivot and change if a client can't do something or wants to try something else, or if you have a brain fart and you're like, "Oh crap, all thoughts just left my brain." It's going to be okay because you understand the basics of boudoir posing, and you'll be great then. So, let's walk through what those basics are. With boudoir, there are really only 4 things a client needs to do, and they don't even need to be able to do all 4. If a client can stand, sit, lay down, or kneel, or any combination of those 4, they can do a boudoir shoot. That's all we're working with: standing, sitting, kneeling, laying. We want to think about how their body moves and kind of what can bend. So, my rule of thumb is if something can bend, we bend it, because shapes are way more interesting for eyes to look at. And I also kind of think of it as we're trying to take someone who is 3-dimensional and make them look 3-dimensional on a 2D space. So, if we can incorporate movement or what looks like movement in a pose, they feel more 3-dimensional on a flat surface. Hopefully that makes sense. So if you have your client and they're just standing like this is not very dynamic. There's no movement in this. You're not showing off any of my curves. You don't get to really see my body in any way. It's very flat. It's very dull. So we got to add in some movement and some bending. I'm going to take my knee. I'm going to bend it. We're going to pop up on my toe and bring it over the other knee. So there's a nice triangle shape in my leg. And then we're going to do the same thing with my hands. Even just bringing them here, this is already so much better. If I push my weight towards that wall, now you can see my hip a little bit more, even better. And if we add some asymmetry, even better, even more dynamic. So if something can bend, you know, we're going to probably bend it. It's pretty simple, right? If something can bend, we bend it. Even the neck, even just a little, like we go from this to this. Oh, did you see how much more like playful that got? Just with a little bend in the neck. Easy peasy. You'll also notice while I was doing that, I was giving my hands something to do. Boudoir Posing 101, we got to give hands a job. Otherwise, we get like clients who are like T-Rex arms, and I don't know what to do with my hands. So let's give them a job. Hands are really great for playing with hair. If your clients have hair, you can bring them up into the very top or keep hands near the bottom. They can grab onto lingerie straps. They can pull bras off of shoulders. They can pull bras in. My favorite is to scoop underneath the bottom of underwear and pull up. Basically, we just want hands to have a job. And even better, bonus tip, if they can be asymmetrical, that adds even more visual interest. So having one hand maybe at like the décolletage level and then one hand up a little bit higher, or one hand underneath underwear and one hand where like the underwear of a bra would be. Boom. Asymmetry. We love to see it. So far we know there's only 4 things that a client has to do: sit, stand, kneel, lay. We know that they're going to bend some part of their body while we're doing it, and we're keeping hands asymmetrical with a job. If you keep these things kind of in the back of your brain, you can pivot and do just about any pose. So let's walk through a couple of examples. I just showed you a standing one, but we're going to do one more standing one. One of my favorite poses is to use the wall. So if I had a client, I would have them bring one elbow up onto the wall. Why? Because look at that nice triangle. We've got a shape. And we're going to rest that hand in hair. Why? Because this hand needs a job to do. we're gonna pivot, not pivot, we're gonna pop up onto our toes. Love pointed toes, a lot of pointed toes with boudoir photography. So I'm popped up onto my left with the bend to get that triangle shape. And then I'm pushing all of my weight towards that wall so you can see the curves that I got going on. And then this hand, what should we do with it? What should we do? Well, let's give it a job. In my case, I have a crop top on, so I'm just gonna grab onto that. But if somebody was wearing lingerie or something, I'd probably have them grab onto a bra strap or the bottom of their bra or their bodysuit. And just, again, so that hand had something to do. We'll put a little bend in my neck as well. And that's it. Boom. We built that in 2 seconds. Just thinking about bending, right? Now you may be wondering, but their face was in it. What do we do about the face? My go-to breathing tip, in through your nose and out through a slightly open mouth. Your clients are probably going to be nervous, a little bit anxious, and they're going to hold on to that tension and that nervousness right in their shoulders and right in their mouth. These are 2 very common areas. Hold on to tension. So when you tell your client, breathe in through your nose and exhale through a slightly open mouth, it's going to relax their mouth and it's going to relax their shoulders as well. Let's take a look at how we could maybe do a kneeling pose, okay? So let's pop, you know what, I'll stay right here. We'll do it right here. So with kneeling, and this is something that not every client can do because not every client has knees that can bend this way. Some people's knees can only bend this far. Some people can come down farther. I really like it when booties can touch heels, but again, that's not possible for every person. And this is why it's really important to talk to our clients and figure out where their bodies are at and not memorizing poses. Because if you memorized a pose where a client sits all the way down on their heels and then they can't do that, now what? Well, let's say our client is sitting all the way down. I probably would have them angled actually a little more towards the light so that there's a lot more shadow over here, but that's a lighting thing. We're going to keep legs open a little bit because this is more of a power pose. And then again, what should we do with our hands? Well, let's give them a job. Let's say they have garter straps on. I'm going to have them probably grab onto their garter straps, pull down. When they pull down, their chest goes forward as well. And then, of course, we're going to put a little bend in the neck. If you want to get extra playful and extra sexy, I would have them flip all of their hair to one side. You pick. They'll get way more volume. I love messy hair. So we'll flip all of that over. They're pulling, and boom, boudoir pose. To get some asymmetry, we might have them grab up here, might have them pull here and grab and push hair in front of their face over here. Now it's visually more interesting because my hands are on different planes. See, so easy. Now, if a client was like, I can't come down that far, you can basically do the same thing where they're sitting up, their legs are just at a 90-degree angle, and now they're pushing their butt back as far as they can, and everything else basically gets to stay the same. Still a great pose if they're not able to sit all the way down, and it's okay because we know what we're doing with hands, we know what we're doing with hair, we know how they're breathing, and even if they can't come all the way down and you're not loving how this looks, this is the perfect shot to come in and get like a close-up. They can do a little hug and get a gorgeous face portrait and chest photo at the same time. So you don't necessarily have to photograph their whole body for this still to be a great pose for a certain portrait, right? So there's our kneeling. Let's talk sitting. Okay, let me show you one of my favorite sitting poses. So I would have my client come and sit right on this ottoman. But again, this is boring. This is not very sensual. It's not sexy. It's not flirty. It's not playful. How can we change this seated pose into something more dynamic, something that has emotion? Well, we're going to start by bringing one hand back so that our client has something that they can lean on, because I am going to want them to bring their chest up towards the sky. And this is like so hard to hold, not fun, not sexy. So we're going to give them something to lean on. We're going to take our legs. Right now they are bent, but this is boring. You can't even see one of them. So we got to stagger them. We got to look for that asymmetry, right? So now they're staggered. And what did I do with my toes? Well, I pointed them. Of course I did. We love pointed toes. I love the definition that it gives to calf muscles. I like just how like long it makes legs look. And yeah, we love pointed toes here in the studio. So we're going to point those toes. We've got staggered feet. And then this hand has to do two things. This arm has to do two things. There's got to be a bend in it, and we want to give it a job. We got to give this hand a job. So the job that I'm giving it is to go up and rest in the very top of the forehead. Chest is lifted, and then that client is just going to think about their breathing. Now, if your client is doing really well, we can do something called flow posing. And you can have your client start in their hand or start in their hair, and they can move their hand across the face. You could go down the neck. We could go over the chest. And we could end up down by our knees. Now, this is really great if you have clients who are very kind of nervous, where I think sometimes static poses they're too in their own head about static posing. So flow posing gets them moving. They don't have time to think about whether or not they look good. They're thinking about, okay, hand has to be in here, hand has to be over, hand is here, hand is here. Like, they've got to concentrate on something else, and they can't think about whether or not they're doing a good or a bad job. They're doing a great job, by the way. They just sometimes are in their own heads about it. So that is how I would do a seated pose, for example. Let me take you to the bed. There's not something I ever thought I would say on YouTube, but let me take you to the bed, and I'm going to show you one of my favorite laying down poses. So your client is laying down on a bed. Awesome. They finally get to lay down on the job and relax a little bit. But again, this is boring. This is not a good pose. We're not doing anything. So where do we start? Well, let's start with the legs. Make them asymmetrical so we can see both of them no matter what angle we're shooting at. I want to be able to see both legs. Toes are pointed. Hands are going to come above and grab onto whatever I can find because they need a job to do. And the job is grab onto the sheet. Now, my light source is that direction, and I want as much light on my client's face as possible. So I'm going to have my client lift their neck up so that they basically have their own spotlight, and they're going to hang out right here, and I'm going to shoot them. Now, if a client has a really hard time arching, maybe they've had back surgery or who knows, you could stick a pillow, let me show you, underneath their shoulder blades so that they don't even have to think about arching. The furniture does the work for them, and I am all about that. Boom. Now they don't have to arch anymore. They just have to think about keeping their chin up. And from here, we can do flow posing again, as long as we're keeping things bent and asymmetrical. So hands could come into hair. One of my favorite poses is to have one of the arms covering the eye, and then this hand just, has to have a job. Love this. But we'll go from here into maybe some kind of flow pose. They can bring their hands over their chest. We can end up grabbing onto something and pulling that fabric in. They can go down onto their thighs. If they have a bodysuit on or underwear, they can pull up. So much we can do just from this basic pose. And all we had to remember was that they need to lay down and stuff needs to be bent. Stuff needs to be asymmetrical. Boom, see, easy, right? This is easy stuff. We don't need to be as intimidated by boudoir posing as maybe you think you do. So even if you're like, I have no idea what to do, you do actually know what to do, right? Because there's only a couple of things you have to keep in mind instead of memorizing 50 poses. Okay, so what do we actually have to remember when we're posing boudoir clients? Well, there's only 4 things that they're going to be doing. They're either standing, they're sitting, they're kneeling, or they're laying down. We want to make sure their hands have some kind of job, something to do. They're touching somewhere, they're asymmetrical. Who knows? It could be anything you want it to be. And we also want to make sure that we're keeping things bent. So no straight arms here because that's not very dynamic or fun. There's always going to be a little bend in the elbow. There's probably going to be maybe a little bend in the neck. Knees are bent if we're able to do it. And once you keep those things in the back of your brain, you can pose anyone, anywhere. Because sometimes you don't know the situation that you're going into, and everybody's bodies are a little bit different. And I don't want anyone to ever feel like, oh no, my plan just went out the window because my client can't do this or I don't have access to that. No, you can pose anyone, anywhere if you just keep those things in the back of your brain. You got this. Good luck with shooting. If I mentioned a tip that was helpful, please leave it in the comments. I would love to know what was helpful. And if you have a posing tip of your own, Also, feel free to leave it in the comments so brand new boudoir photographers can get all the education they possibly need to give their clients the best time ever. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure that you like and you subscribe for more photography education. And I will see you all here in the Buxton Boudoir studio again. Bye.